Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This workshop is part of our 2023 Student Debt Workshop series on student debt cancellation and federal loan information. These workshops are co-hosted by the Campaign for California Borrowers' Rights Coalition and the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. And today we are happy to have been able to put this on with the help of our State Assembly Speaker, Robert Rivas. Next slide. Before we begin, we do have some important information about today's webinar. This is going to be recorded so we can share the information today to everyone who registered, and everyone will be getting a follow-up email after today with this recording and resources shared. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen throughout the workshop, and know that we will be answering questions live towards the end of the webinar today. We'll try our best to get to as many questions as possible. Please know things are ever changing around student loans and the programs. So please note that the information shared today is accurate of this moment. Also note that we are not lawyers or financial advisors. We are policy experts and program experts and borrowers helping borrowers, along with the expertise of our State Department who will be presenting today. Next slide. So many of you are likely tuning in from the Central Valley, thanks to your state representatives, Speaker of the State Assembly, Robert Rivas. So we do want to start by, again, thanking and expressing our deep thanks to the Speaker and his staff for helping us put this all on today for you. My name is Samantha Sang. I'm the Legislative Director and Policy Advisor at NextGen Policy or California. And we're one of the 5 organizations that co-lead the Campaign for California Borrowers' Rights Coalition. Our coalition is composed of diverse organizations working together to ensure student borrowers see a future free of debt. So with us today, you'll also hear from our coalition partner, Spencer Dixon, Senior Policy Advisor at the Student Debt Crisis Center, and Sada Baobibsa, West Advocacy Manager at Young Invincibles. Also making today's webinar possible, and I'm happy to introduce Selena Damian, who's our very own state student loan ombudsperson at the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, or DFPI. Selena, do we have you on the line?
Yes. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Good morning. Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here today, joining the campaign to provide this very important information. Before we get started, my name is Selena Damian. I am the ombudsperson at the DFPI. DFPI is the state's consumer protection agency. Our job is to regulate companies of financial products to ensure compliance, and this includes student loan servicers. We accept and we review consumer complaints. We can take legal action when these companies are not in compliance, and we protect consumers from fraud and abuse through education and outreach. And some of our outreach topics include student loans, student loan literacy, credit building, and how to protect yourself from scams and fraud. Next, please. In California, we have 4 million borrowers that owe $141 billion of student loan debt. The majority of that is federal student loan debt. California has the highest number of enrolled college students at 2.58 million. The average debt load of a California borrower is $37,000, and the average monthly payment is $203. The majority of student loan debt is held by borrowers between the ages of 35 to 49 years old. And in the United States, borrowers owe $1.78 trillion of student loan debt. That amount is the second highest consumer debt category behind mortgages, and it continues growing. Next, please. It is important to note that student loan debt has an outsized impact to students of color. In California, over 56% of students who attend public 2- and 4-year universities come from low-income families or those that earn $40,000 or less. 90% of Black and 72% of Latinx students take out college loans in comparison to 66% of white borrowers. And basically, It's because we are going to school at higher rates, which is a great thing, but because of several factors, we are having to take out more debt. And I say we as a first-generation college student. A borrower in a 75% minority neighborhood is 5 times more likely to fall behind on their student loan payments. Default rates are higher for Black borrowers, followed by Latinx borrowers and first-generation students. And Black women have the largest student debt burdens of all, with the highest rate of default, and they are taking longer to pay the loans off as well. Next, please. So in order to mitigate the impact of student loan debt and to protect borrowers, several states have enacted laws to protect borrowers. And California is one of those states. In California, we have what is called the California Student Borrower Bill of Rights, or Assembly Bill 376. This is a law that was passed in 2020, which prohibits servicers from engaging in abusive, unfair, or deceptive practices and requires that they work in the best financial interest of borrowers, which is something that we historically have not seen being done. Servicers must provide borrowers with information and applications for income-driven repayment or IDR plans and other forms for federal benefits and protections. So this is really important right now, because that means when a borrower is calling their servicer, their federal student loan servicer, to obtain information, whether it's just basic information about your account balance, to process your IDR application, to find out what is going on with the status of your application, your PSLF application, TPD application, they should be able to provide you with that information. This bill establishes special protections for military borrowers, those working in public service, older borrowers, and borrowers with disabilities. So servicers have to train their staff, their employees, to work specifically with these borrowers and provide them the information they need. Now, this one is very important. This provision protects borrowers from any negative consequences stemming from a sale, assignment, transfer, system conversion, or payment made by the borrower's original servicer. So basically what this means is that a borrower should not incur a negative consequence as a result of a loan transfer. So this could include a credit error, something in their account history, maybe missing payment information. During the payment pause, millions of accounts were transferred to new servicers. So the servicer maybe went out of business, they didn't renew their contract. Borrowers did not know, did not request the transfers, but they happened automatically. So come October 1st, 2023, many borrowers saw that their accounts were transferred, that they had new servicers. So a borrower should not be incurring any negative consequence. If a borrower feels that any of these laws were violated, even if it's that they cannot get through to their student loan servicer, they're on hold, they're getting inconsistent information, which we know is happening, they're not getting correct counts, they can submit a complaint through us, and we will process the complaint, we will monitor the complaints, and ensure that there is a timely and thorough response. This bill also created my position to work directly with borrowers and to do this kind of education and outreach. Next, please. So before we get started, I do want to go over some key terms for borrowers to understand. And the reason I'm going over these is because I get these questions all the time. So it is very important to understand the difference between federal loans and private loans, and then your lender and your servicer. So for federal loans, these are loans that are made and funded directly by the U.S. Department of Education, where the interest rates are fixed and they don't change unless a borrower consolidates. So unless you convert your loans into one direct consolidation loan, your rates should stay the same. There are aggregate and annual limits, and there are subsidized and unsubsidized. So the only difference between those is the way that the interest accrues. Subsidized, no interest accrues when you are in school and starts once you get into repayment after your grace period, and unsubsidized means the interest was accruing from the time of disbursement. However, they are still federal loans and considered direct loans or direct loans. Then you have your private loans, which are made by a lender such as a bank. So it could be your Discover, your Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, credit union, a state agency, or even directly from your school. Those are considered private loans. These loans don't offer the flexible repayment terms and forgiveness options provided by federal student loans, everything which we will be talking about shortly. And then a borrower may have a mix of both federal and private loans. So that's why it's important to know which loans you have. That way you know what program you can apply for or you qualify for. And then your lender and your servicer for federal loans, your lender is Department of Education. And then student loan servicer, which you just heard me talk about, and the borrower bill of rights applies to them. So it is your main point of contact. The servicer is the company that tracks the loans while you are in school. So Department of Education contracts with these servicers, with these companies, to send you your bill each month, to process your loan payments, any changes in plans, deferments, forbearances. So as I said, millions were transferred during the COVID payment pause, and you may be transferred to several servicers throughout the life of the loan. You can't request a transfer, and then you may have more than one servicer if you have more than one loan. So it's very important that you know who your servicer is and who you need to be contacting to make all these changes and ask questions. Next, please. And these are your current federal student loan servicers: Mohila, Nelnet, Advantage, Ed Financial, and then some of your private lenders. It is very important to note there are these loans which we call FEL loans. Those are commercially held loans which are backed by Department of Education. So for FEL loans, those are, Navient has a lot of those loans, but FEL loans are special loans which may still qualify for some of these programs. Go on studentaid.gov and you may have one of those loans, and we will be talking about those as well. Next, please. Okay, and I will hand it over now. Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. This is Spencer Dixon from the Student Debt Crisis Center. Starting off by talking about the previous student loan cancellation plan. It's a bit sad to talk about, but this was the plan that the Biden administration announced last summer. It would have provided up to $10,000 of student loan forgiveness to borrowers making less than $125,000 in a single household, or $250,000 in a two-income household. For those borrowers that were Pell Grant recipients, that would have been $20,000 in relief. As many folks know by now, earlier this summer, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down this plan. Notably, the ruling narrowly applies to the HEROES Act, which was the federal law that the Biden administration used to, it's the authority that it cited when it came up with the plan. But the administration is able to pursue another pathway to forgiveness through the Higher Education Act, which it is currently doing, which I'll talk about more on the next slide. So following the Supreme Court ruling, the president announced a plan to secure student debt cancellation using an alternative legal authority, as I mentioned, under the Higher Education Act. This authority and regulatory process requires what's called a negotiated rulemaking process, or NEGREG for short. And that has begun, which allowed the public to submit comment about this potential plan. And the administration has already started to release some outlines and guidelines of what a potential plan could look like. But it is up to this committee, which has already met, I believe, twice, and is due to meet for the final time next week, to consider this outline and to ultimately vote on it among the committee. This process, unlike the one that the administration pursued when coming up with its plan last year, is lengthier, and it has more rigid requirements in terms of review and public comment. So the final rule is going to take some time to be released, but the committee should be voting on the proposal, I believe, next week. And if there is consensus among the committee, which is unclear depending on how different members will vote, if there is consensus, then that rule will be the one that the administration accepts. If there's not, the administration does have an opportunity to amend that proposal. And there are definitely opportunities for borrowers to engage in that process, submit public comment, and make your voice heard. So, as folks know by now, the payment pause has come to an end. That ended at the end of August. September is when interest started to resume, and in October is when payments began for borrowers. Although another program that folks may not be familiar with is the on-ramp to repayment. This is not a program you have to apply for. It is automatic flexibility that's provided to all borrowers. And it runs from October of this past year through September of 2024. And these are a set of flexible policies that apply to everyone. And again, you do not need to apply for it. So what this means is it prevents borrowers from becoming delinquent or defaulting on their loans if you miss a payment during this 12-month period. Missed payments during this period will not be reported to collection agencies or credit bureaus. However, interest will continue to accrue should you miss your monthly payment, and future monthly bills will be automatically adjusted to reflect that accrued interest. So for many borrowers, they're going to benefit from enrolling in an income-driven repayment plan, which I'll talk about, especially the SAVE plan, which is the newest one, which offers some new benefits when it comes to interest accrual. Before talking about SAVE, though, just want to touch on the Fresh Start program on the next slide. So the Fresh Start program is a one-time temporary program from the department that offers special benefits for borrowers with defaulted student loans. This allows borrowers a more streamlined process of returning your defaulted loans into repayment status. It removes the record of your default from your credit report. It allows access to studentaid.gov and other student loans and grants, and stops collections. You must contact your loan holder to formally enroll with this to make these benefits permanent. Essentially, sort of like the on-ramp program, Fresh Start is automatic. These flexibilities and streamlined process of getting out of default is automatic, but only for the next 9 or so months until September of 2024. Otherwise, you do need to contact your student loan holder and request to be formally enrolled in the Fresh Start program to extend those benefits beyond that September 2024 period. So this program, again, is for borrowers who were in default before the pandemic pause and are still in default. And it's definitely something that folks should take advantage of. So as I mentioned previously, there is a new income-driven repayment program called the Saving on a Valuable Education Plan, or SAVE. This new income-driven repayment plan replaced the revised pay-as-you-earn plan, or REPAY. And this plan raises the amount of income that is considered non-discretionary income. And non-discretionary income is the income that is shielded from having to go towards paying your student loans. Think of it like the standard tax deduction on your tax return. That basically says, you don't have to pay taxes on that first $12,000 or so. Non-discretionary income when it comes to student loans is like that. But unlike the standard deduction, this threshold is all the way up to about $33,000 for all borrowers, which means if you make that much a year or less, you are going to have a $0 monthly payment under the SAVE plan. If you make more than that, that first $33,000, if you're a single borrower, is shielded so that you only have to pay a percentage of your income above that threshold. So that basically means for a borrower that makes $15 an hour and works full time, they're going to have a $0 monthly payment. There's a couple other really important new benefits from SAVE. Under SAVE, any unpaid interest on any given month is not going to carry over month to month. So let's say your accrued monthly interest is $100, but you're one of the borrowers that has a $0 monthly payment. Under the old IDRs, that interest would accrue and carry over month to month and add up. Under SAVE, that's not going to happen. Your interest accrual will be $0 month to month. Now, if let's say your obligated monthly payment was $100 and your interest was $100, that payment's going to go towards your interest, but it's any uncovered interest from your payment. Another benefit is borrowers will have some flexibility around forgiveness. So for borrowers with loan balances between $12,000 and $22,000 in original loan balance, and that's the amount that you originally took out to pay for your schooling, and before any interest kicked in or before you made any payments. If you're in that, if you're either in that window, the 12 to 22 or under 12,000, you're going to get benefits from SAVE in terms of how long you have to be in repayment. If you had an original loan balance of $12,000 or less, it's 10 years of repayment. That used to be 20 under the old IDR. And if you're in between those 12 and 22, you basically have to pay for one additional year for each $1,000 above that $12,000 threshold. So basically, $13,000 in original loan balance would be 11 years of repayment, $14,000 would be 12 years, so on. One benefit I skipped over here is borrowers will pay, this starts next year, in the summer of 2024, from 10% to 5% of your discretionary income on undergraduate loans. And if you have graduate and undergraduate, it's going to be a weighted average based on that original loan balance between 5 and 10%. And then lastly, if you happen to have been enrolled in Repay, you are already enrolled in SAVE. Because SAVE replaced Repay, there was sort of a seamless transition there for those borrowers that were in Repay. So next slide, just talking now about the one-time income-driven repayment account adjustment. This is a process where the administration is basically going borrower by borrower to review each borrower's file and make sure that borrowers are getting the maximum number of payment credits towards either IDR forgiveness or PSLF, public service loan forgiveness. And what this means is, for IDR forgiveness, borrowers had to be in repayment for a certain number of years. But it's actually broken down by month, and the same is true for PSLF. But for many borrowers, because of servicer mismanagement in the past, and that continues to this day, borrowers weren't always getting those credits that they really deserved. And so the administration is going through, looking back at each borrower's record and giving as many of those credits as possible, even in cases where a borrower wasn't actually making a payment, but they're going to give credit for that for the purpose of forgiveness. One really important thing is that this only applies to federal loans that are held by the federal government. And so if you have an older loan, which was actually or is actually owned by a bank, which is called a commercially held FFEL loan, you need to consolidate before the end of this year, before the end of this month, on December 31st, excuse me, in order to qualify for this one-time account adjustment. So you'll know if you had a commercially held FFEL loan, if you had to be making payments during the payment pause on your federal loans, it's very likely that you had commercially held FFEL loans. And we strongly encourage folks to look into consolidation and to take that action before the end of the month so that you can benefit from this really helpful program. I'm not going to tick through all these, but as you can see on your screen there, the account adjustment counts all of these cases of what really weren't repayment, but they're going to count as repayment. So if you were in certain kind of forbearances or deferments, that's going to count, which is going to be really helpful for a lot of borrowers. So next slide, we're going to talk about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a program created in 2007, meaning that for the purposes of applying for PSLF, only service starting on October 1st, 2007 counts. It allows for student loan forgiveness after 10 years of service and 10 years of payment at the same time. There are some requirements, though. It has to be a direct loan. These older FFEL loans under the sort of normal rules do not apply. The employment has to be for a government agency or organization at any level, so local, state, or federal, as well as 501c3 nonprofits. And you have to be working on average 30 hours a week, which is what is classified as full-time for this purpose. The repayment plan are all income-driven repayment plans, as well as the standard plan. And so once you've made 120, which is equivalent to 10 years, 120 monthly payments, and have worked during that time, you will get forgiveness tax-free under the program. That's the way it's supposed to work. But as many folks either have experienced personally or may have read about, there have been a lot of problems with the program. And so the administration has implemented some flexibility in the program that is still ongoing. There was a waiver to a lot of these requirements that did expire last year, but most of those flexibilities are going to be reflected through this account adjustment that I've talked about. And as part of that waiver and some of the flexibilities, over or almost 42,000 Californians have received nearly $3 billion in student loan forgiveness as of March of this year through this program. And then in terms of applying, on the next slide, if you missed the waiver and are still employed with a qualifying employer, there are many benefits to consolidating your loan, but only that benefit is only maximized if you consolidate before the end of this year. If you may have been working in public service for many years, but you haven't applied for PSLF, that's okay. It's sort of retroactive, at least back to 2007. So as long as you meet these other requirements, you're going to benefit, which even includes having these older FFEL loans. In order to get that benefit, you have to consolidate before the end of the year, but you're going to have those payments, those credits sort of applied through the one-time account adjustment. So just in terms of applying, you can look up through the link there, and I don't know if that'll be able to be shared in the chat, but you can look up if your employer qualifies. But again, it's any government office, state, local, or federal, as well as a 501c3 nonprofit. You can log into your studentaid.gov account to see what kind of loans you have. And then through that other link there, you can consolidate your loan. There really is pretty much no disadvantage to consolidating your loans, at least as long as you apply before the end of this month. And then with all that in mind, the actual process of submitting your application is submitting your employer certification form. This is a form that is sent to your employer to verify that you worked when you are saying you worked. And that form is then sent off to the one student loan servicer that runs the PSLF program, which is Mohila, and they're going to be the ones to review your record and go through and count the number of credits that align where you worked and you made that payment at the same time. The last thing I'll say is for those months of qualifying employment that overlapped with the pandemic pause, even though payments weren't actually being made, those do count for PSLF credits as long as you were working for an eligible employer. So with that, I will hand things off over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Spencer, for all that wonderful information. We are going to address return to repayment. So as we've mentioned, under the CARES Act in 2020, all payments were paused, but that has since resumed since September of this year. There was a proposed on-ramp to repayment program. However, we would like to note that the on-ramp period, which allows you up to 12 months to start making payments, would accumulate your interest every month. So it's important to note that if you are deciding to opt into the on-ramp program. So federal repayments resumed on October 1st. And a lot of borrowers are reporting a lot of issues with their accounts, enrolling in new repayment plans and billing. I've even heard of personally from borrowers whose repayment amount did not match up with their discretionary income calculation. So it's really important to stay on top of that information and be aware when looking on your account. Some things to remember is that there have been a lot of service transfers. So it's really important for you to know who your servicer is and your loan information. It's important for you to update your contact information if that changes with your loan servicer and studentaid.gov. It's also really crucial to read all communication that comes from your servicer and also from the Department of Education. If you recently applied for a new or a different type of repayment plan, your servicer might place you on administrative forbearance while they process this. And these months under administrative forbearance would count towards PSLF and IDR forgiveness count. You are able to also explore your repayment options on the link that is on the page right now, which is studentaid.gov/loan-simulator. If you are in default, you can apply for the Fresh Start program before the end of September in 2024, which is next year, to receive access to repayment plans and forgiveness programs. If you're in default and you do not apply for Fresh Start, you're not able to access these repayment plans. And you can read more information on that on studentaid.gov in the link listed below. I'll go on to next slide.
Thank you, Sarah. And one thing that we do want borrowers to be aware of with all the confusion, with everything, with Restart, Payment Restart, we do have, unfortunately, some companies that are reaching out to student loan borrowers through, or even some that don't even have student loans. They're contacting borrowers via text, via phone, via mail, sometimes mail with official looking logos. It's very important for borrowers to be aware that these are not official companies. It's not your student loan servicer. So in order to be prepared, know the name of your student loan servicer. We've been stressing the importance of who they are, how to find the information. I know it keeps coming up in the chat. Studentaid.gov, it's going to be your main portal. You can find your servicer information there. If a company reaches out to you, you can verify the information or research the company. Don't sign up for anything. Don't give them any information. They're going to request your FSA, your login information, password. Do not subscribe to any monthly service or sign a contract. What they are doing basically is they are doing all these applications, PSLF, consolidation, and they're just logging onto your account and doing them for you. I have seen borrowers that have signed power of attorneys over to these companies, and then they're stuck in a long-term contract, 6 month up to a year contract. I recently spoke to a borrower who was making payments or thought she was making payments to her servicer, and it wasn't actually her servicer. It was during the payment pause. So that money was lost. And unfortunately, it was a company overseas. So just remember that there's nothing that a company can do for you that you can't do on your own for free. You shouldn't be paying any company for any of these services. I'm available, DFPI is available. There's many resources. I know the information may seem confusing, but sometimes you just attend these webinars, hear it repeatedly, and you'll get the information. But there are free resources. Servicers and the federal government, they will not call you multiple times a day. If someone is offering special access or there is a sense of urgency, you have to apply now, you have to get forgiveness now. It is most likely a scam, so I would be very careful. It is very hard to get out of these contracts, and many times the borrower needs to contact their bank, cancel the card, and then there's they may attempt to come after you through a collection action or legal action if there was a contract signed. You can file a complaint with us if you have been a victim. You can file a complaint through us or through the Federal Trade Commission, who is also tracking these companies that are doing these kinds of things. Next, please. And then passing it over.
Thank you, Selena. So in California, as Sam mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we represent a group of advocates, a coalition of advocates called Campaign for California Borrowers' Rights. And we are always looking to address student debt issues in California and beyond. So coming up next in California, we are currently California colleges and universities are using harmful debt collection practices around institutional debt. And institutional debt is debt that's owed by a student directly to their higher ed institution. And it results traditionally in unpaid tuition or other financial obligations or fees. Currently, colleges and universities can withhold diplomas or bar students from re-enrolling in order to collect on this debt. There's also additional harmful collection practices that you can learn more about if you go to californiaborrowers.org. If you have a story or an experience similar to this, or you know a student who is experiencing something similar to this, please go on our website and learn more information and see how you can become involved.
All right, thank you, everyone. So that was a lot of information, and we want to be sure to help answer some questions today. So we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So feel free to keep dropping your questions in the Q&A box. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We're also going to go to the next slide, and we'll have the slide up for the remainder, some time here so that you can get some important links that were mentioned throughout today's webinar. Again, everyone is going to get a copy of this recording as well as a copy of the slide deck. So you will get all of these resources in a follow-up email. All right, so for our panelists, we are getting a lot of questions too about folks that are, in the group that's going to be making a payment for the first time this year. And so if someone applies to the SAVE plan and the student loan debt forgiveness, I'm assuming that maybe that's PSLF, do they need to consolidate their loans? And will this change the due date of their repayment?
I can answer that, but can you repeat it? They're talking about repayment and consolidation, correct?
Yeah, it sounds like if they're going to make a payment for the first time this year, and if they're applying to both SAVE and I'm assuming here maybe PSLF, do they need to consolidate their loans first? And if doing so, would that change the date of their payment, their due date?
Yeah, well, the only reason they would need to consolidate would be, if it's someone with new loans, they're going to have most likely direct loans. So there wouldn't be a need to consolidate. That's only for, let's say, a Parent Plus borrower that needs to consolidate for ICR, a FEL borrower that needs to consolidate into the direct consolidation program. If someone has new direct loans, they can apply for the SAVE program, but they wouldn't start repayment until after their grace period. Let's say they are working already with the qualifying employer while they are in school, they would, once they certified, they would start receiving credit once they were in repayment. So you can't, if it's your first set of loans, your first, you're just graduating, you can't defer or request for them to defer the grace period or the in-school deferment. You just have to wait until you start repayment. So for first-time borrowers, once you're in repayment, you can apply for SAVE a few months earlier. Once you're in the SAVE program, start paying, then you can certify for PSLF or apply for PSLF, and then from that time forward, you would start accruing credit.
Yeah, and a quick follow-up there, I think, is the SAVE plan a qualifying plan under the PSLF program?
Yes, so the PSLF plan requires, that you are under an income-driven repayment plan. There are 4 income-driven repayment plans, and the SAVE plan is one of those plans. So it is, as I mentioned, the newest, most affordable. So even if you're making a $0 payment, because that's based on your income, even if you're at $0, as long as your status shows in repayment and you're certifying your employment, those months will count. And then if I could just throw one thing in there, all the for those that are already in repayment and are on the PSLF track, all the months from the COVID forbearance, 3.5 years, as long as you certify, those months will count towards your PSLF. So I know we do that's one of our most popular programs, and we get that question a lot. So even if you made no payment, right, which that was a requirement, you will receive credit towards PSLF.
Right. And actually, there's another question related to that. Is there a way to find out how many payments someone has made toward qualifying for PSLF to plan out, kind of how many more payments they need to make?
No, the only really way to know officially is to apply. So you don't have to apply once you hit the 10 years. So that's sort of a misconception. I would recommend that you apply as soon as you're, a year in. Some people qualify or apply as soon as they're 6 months in. That way you can track your progress. Many times within 10 years, we know employment changes happen, employer changes. So you don't want to wait until you're 10 years in to find out that the nonprofit that you worked for closed, they're no longer operating, then you can't get a hold of them. If you're, with the government agency, many times you switch agencies. So you want to start tracking as early as possible. That way you have an official count, if there's any gaps, if there's any payments that aren't being counted, and then you can deal with that then.
Great. Thank you for that. Let's see. We've had a couple of Parent Plus loan questions show up in the chat. So maybe, can parents with Parent Plus loans benefit from income-driven repayment plans and public service loan forgiveness, or what kind of options are available to our Parent Plus loan carriers here?
Yeah, so yes, they can qualify for PSLF. So if you have a Parent Plus loan, the borrower, the parent has to consolidate into a direct consolidation loan. Once you consolidate, you can be eligible for one of the income-driven repayment plans, which is the ICR plan. And then at that point, you can apply for PSLF. So the qualifying employment has to be for the parent. So many times there's confusion, like who is the one working, right? Who's the employee? It has to be the borrower. So the parent borrower, if they're the employee, then they can certify and they can apply for PSLF. But again, they do have to consolidate. And unfortunately, the only IDR plan that they are eligible for is the ICR plan, which is not as affordable as the new SAVE plan. Unfortunately, and many people were advocating for that, right? We really wanted to give Parent Plus borrowers that additional reprieve or benefit, but it's only the ICR plan. So really check out, know your options. And sometimes it may be, depending on the balance, and depending on the borrower's income, sometimes you may pay off your loan prior to the 10 years. So it's you really need to explore your options and know really what benefits you the most, and as the most affordable. So these links here are really important. I don't know if we put up the link for the simulator, the FSA, the student loan simulator, where you can get an estimate of payments. But to answer your question regarding Parent Plus, they do qualify.
And Sam, just to jump in, Selena's exactly right. The only repayment plan for Parent Plus loans officially is ICR. There is a loophole. It's called the double consolidation loophole. I'm not going to get into it because it's very complicated, but I am going to drop a link to the chat here, which provides a resource. The Massachusetts Office of the Attorney General provides step-by-step instructions that would encourage folks, if you're interested, to follow to the letter, because getting that right is really, really important.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yes, unfortunately, all these things are very complicated, and every little technical error does matter. So thank you for dropping that link, Spencer. We have a question from Anna. If a person has already rehabilitated their student loans to bring them out of default and they defaulted again, can they do the Fresh Start plan?
Yes, it depends on when they rehabilitated, but I would really consider looking at that, because it is a really good benefit. So it doesn't, even if you had a previous rehabilitation, you can apply.
Good to know. We had another question, I'm guessing from a student. Can you start paying loans before you're done with school, or would that trigger or start your monthly payments prematurely?
So as I mentioned before, if you're a brand new student, you can't defer the grace period, but you can, if you have unsubsidized loans, you can pay some on your interest. You can make payments to pay down the interest, but it won't be, you won't officially start repayment until after the 6 months.
All right. A couple more questions on SAVE as well. Does a spouse's income need to be reported to apply for the SAVE program, or is it just the borrower's income?
It depends on how you file your taxes. So if you are married and file separately, SAVE only counts the one borrower's income, which for many borrowers is going to be a benefit. If you don't currently file your taxes that way, each person's case is going to be different, and we certainly can't provide any tax advice, but it may be worth balancing, the benefit of SAVE versus any sort of benefit you might get on filing your taxes jointly.
Thanks, Spencer. And then do we know for the SAVE plan's monthly payments, is the income threshold before or after taxes?
I'm 95% sure it's after taxes. I believe it's an adjusted gross income.
Great. We also had a question earlier, I think, around student debt cancellation, and we got the updates that the program is kind of on pause and going through a federal regulation process. But does the Supreme Court's decision to block debt cancellation impact any of these other important updates that we've shared today?
No, not directly, unless they take additional extreme action.
Great. And then Selena's answering this right now, but also it would be helpful to just get a sense for folks asking about PSLF. Approximately how long does that PSLF application process take?
So the application, as long as you have your employer's information, which you need, you'll need your employer's FEIN number, and you have your account all set up, probably about 30 minutes, I would say. It's okay, there's the PSLF link. You'll do it under the PSLF help tool. And the reason why you need your employer's email is because now they're doing a digital signature process. So before you had to mail you had to fill out the application, mail it, print it, download it, email it to your employer. Now they're doing it automatically through DocuSign. So there is a really good, like a ninja help tool, which gives you instructions, really good pointers, but you can do it, as long as you're prepared, probably in about 30 minutes, and you don't have, like 10 employers, you'll be able to get through it. Of course, you need the 10 years of 120 payments, 120 payments. So the actual application, it shouldn't take too long, and the paper application is still available for those that don't have access. So this right here, this link has a link to the actual help tool where you'll be doing your first application and then subsequent certifications, and then also the Ninja tool.
Great, thanks for highlighting that, Selena. Another question around PSLF in the chat or the Q&A box. So if someone does stop, do payments stop if you re-enroll in school? And if so, does the time you are enrolled still count for PSLF as long as you are still employed with a qualifying nonprofit?
So if you already have loans, you're already on the PSLF track, and then you re-enroll, you can, at that point, you can waive that in-school deferment for those loans. You'll have to waive it through your servicer, continue making payments, continue certifying. If you take out new loans, those loans are the ones that you won't be able to get credit for. So those new ones. But if you're going back to school, you can request an in-school deferment and receive credit. I just did a PSLF webinar, so still fresh, fresh on the brain.
There you go. All right. We've had some questions about consolidation. There's been a lot of questions about consolidation, and I know it's very specific to like your type of plan that you have or your loan and to what kind of program that you're going into. So maybe can we just highlight some major takeaways around consolidation? I know there's been talk about that consolidation deadline coming up too.
Yeah, so consolidation, again, is when you are taking your federal loans and basically merging them, putting them all together into a direct consolidation loan. So this may help you maybe if you have a lot of loans, if you just want to like have one payment. It does extend your payment period. So it is similar to refinancing, right? Because you're extending your payment term, your interest rate, you get a weighted average of your interest rates if you have different interest rates on your loans. So some borrowers may benefit from consolidating, some may not. Some of the reasons people like to consolidate is, again, because of that, they just want one payment, right? Another one of the reasons is for PSLF, for those borrowers, Parent Plus borrowers that want to apply for an IDR plan. We talked about the FEL borrowers. So these are borrowers, again, that have those older commercially held loans that just stand alone, just on their own, do not qualify for PSLF. They don't qualify for the IDR adjustment. But right now, if they consolidate into a direct consolidation loan by December 31st, then they can not only receive access to PSLF and be reviewed under the IDR adjustment, but they will get credit for past payments. So because these loans are ones that were disbursed or given out prior to 2010, a lot of these, pretty much the majority of loans that were given out in the early 90s, 2000s, so these are borrowers that have had loans for a long period of time, will have these FEL loans. And so we want them to consolidate and take advantage of this and not lose their payment history. Another reason why a borrower might want to consolidate is to, if they have maybe all direct loans after 2010 loans and they want one, they want to just receive credit on the oldest loan and then apply for PSLF. So I think right now for the message, or what I would think is really priority, is those FEL borrowers. We don't want them to lose credit. They're the ones that have been on repayment for a long time. Make sure you check your loans, really it's sort of a strategic thing. Unfortunately, it's not as straightforward, just yes, consolidate, you'll qualify. Really look at what loans you have and what your goal is. If your goal is, if you've been in public service for a while, you have FFEL loans, you do need to take action now. And then, you know, Parent Plus, you still have some time to consolidate. Direct loans, you pretty much, as long as you qualify, those alone just qualify for PSLF. So you can email me if you have questions. I know it's not as straightforward answer, but I hope that helped. But you're still keeping your loans with Department of Ed. So it's different than refinancing into a private loan. Okay, so they're still federal loans.
Great, thanks for going with that through that overview about consolidation. A lot of points to keep in mind, folks. So we're gonna also, before we get to the last couple of questions here, put up the next slide for some helpful links as well. And you'll find that, you know, a lot of your questions I know are very specific, and so it's hard to get into some of those details here through a quick Q&A session. So please take advantage of some of these resources where you can email your situation and try to get some more answers specific to your case here. And so the next question we had, are there any specific debt forgiveness programs for graduate students?
Well, PSLF is it is a plan. It has nothing to do with if you were undergrad or graduate. It has to do with your employer. So graduate students do qualify for the public service loan forgiveness. If you're not under a public service employer, then there's income-driven repayment forgiveness. And then the SAVE plan, I'm not sure if they mentioned it, but it comes with a forgiveness component. It still hasn't kicked in. It's effective July 1st, 2024, but I would look into that as well. But I believe that one's only for undergrad, correct, Sam?
Sorry, for which one again?
For the SAVE forgiveness component next year, or Spencer, can you correct me? That one's only for undergrad? It's only for
the added flexibility is
Yes.
only for undergrad,
Oh, okay.
where you have an original loan balance of 12,000 or less. That's only for undergrad, where you would only have to be in repayment for 10 years. If you have any graduate whatsoever, it's going to be a minimum of 20 years of repayment, but more likely 25, depending on what that original balance was.
Thank you.
All right. And maybe our last question for today. I'm trying to quickly read through these as they're coming in, so sorry, folks. We have a question on what if you've been working for for a qualified public service employer for 6 years, and I think they made $0 payments because of income, $0 payments because of income-driven repayment plans, and you have never applied because you thought you have to make payments. Would you still qualify for PSLF?
Well,
So
you won't know if you qualify in your account until you actually applied. But yes, if you are under an IDR plan and your payment is $0, $2, $5, it doesn't matter. As long as you're in repayment status, those payments will count towards PSLF. So I would encourage you to apply, and then you'll get an official count from MOHELA, the student loan servicer, that's the PSLF servicer. You'll get a count, and then you can see, again, look at what's been approved, what approved payments you have, what your count is, and then go from there. But even if you're at $0, as long as you're enrolled, those can count towards PSLF.
great. All right. So again, thank you all for attending today's webinar. That's all the time we have. We will be emailing out the recording as well as the slide deck to everyone who registered. And again, please use these links and the resources we shared today. Work with the Federal Department of Education, work with our Department of Financial Protection and Innovation with your questions to make sure you're getting the best advice and real resources. Thank you to all our presenters, Spencer, Selena, Sara, and our technical assistants today behind the scenes, Kimberly and Andrea. Thank you again to our special guest speaker, Robert Rivas, and his team for making today possible as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.